Picture the Western Front in 1916. The air hangs thick with cordite and wet earth, the horizon punctuated by skeletal trees, and the constant percussion of artillery that, just reverberates through your chest. But amid this industrial nightmare, something remarkable was happening beneath the mud. Millions of ordinary men were transforming the nature of warfare itself, not through military doctrine, but through the skills they'd brought from civilian life. The carpenter who'd built barns in Yorkshire, the plumber from Pittsburgh, the electrician from Berlin. These men didn't just fight a war, they engineered survival in conditions that would have honestly broken armies of previous generations. This is the story of how the calloused hands of peacetime craftsmen became the most valuable weapons in the trenches. When the armies dug in during the autumn of 1914, military commanders quickly realized their staff colleges had taught them nothing about living in the earth for years on end. Enter the miners, the men who'd spent their lives in darkness understanding the language of soil and timber. These civilian experts revolutionized trench warfare, transforming muddy ditches into elaborate underground cities, complete with ventilation systems, drainage networks, and structural supports that could, actually withstand bombardment. A coal miner from Wales named William Hackett became legendary for his ability to shore up collapsing tunnels under fire, using techniques he'd learned in the pits of CWM. He would test the walls with his knuckles, listening to the timber's groans, the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat, knowing instinctively when a support beam needed replacement before catastrophe struck. The Great War was the first truly mechanized conflict, and honestly, nothing prepared armies for the maintenance nightmare of keeping trucks, tanks, and aircraft operational in field conditions. The peacetime mechanics, blacksmiths, and machinists became indispensable, often more valuable than combat soldiers. These men could look at a broken fuel pump or seized engine and see solutions that factory-trained military mechanics missed entirely. They scavenged parts from wrecked vehicles, fabricated replacements using field forges and basic lathes, and kept the machinery of war grinding forward through sheer ingenuity. Perhaps no civilian skill proved more transformative than those of the electricians, telephone operators, and early radio enthusiasts who suddenly found themselves responsible for keeping entire armies connected. These were men who'd strung telephone lines for rural exchanges or wired apartment buildings in growing cities, and now they were threading communication networks through hellscapes where a single shell could sever contact with headquarters. They developed waterproofing techniques using tar and canvas, buried cables at depths that could survive all but direct hits, and created redundant systems that military doctrine hadn't conceived. Standing at the edge of a preserved trench today, you can still see the ingenuity carved into earth and timber. The soldiers of the Great War didn't just endure. They innovated, adapted, and ultimately transformed how we think about the relationship between civilian expertise and military necessity. Their legacy isn't found in the grand strategies or decisive battles, but in the 10,000 small solutions that kept men alive. The drainage system designed by a farmer, the ventilation shaft engineered by a miner, the communication network maintained by an electrician who once wired department stores. For those of us who study fieldcraft and preparedness today, these stories carry profound lessons. True survival isn't about having military training or tactical gear. It's about adaptability, resourcefulness, and the ability to apply whatever skills you possess to unprecedented challenges. The next time you're in the field, building a shelter or purifying water, remember that you're part of this continuum, ordinary people using practical knowledge to overcome extraordinary circumstances. If this journey through history has sparked something in you, subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this video with fellow travelers on the path of self-reliance, because these stories, these techniques, these lessons from the mud and blood of the past, they're not just history. They're a handbook for resilience that every generation needs to rediscover. Stay prepared, stay curious, and keep the skills alive.